natural selection and random mutation can explain the survival, but not the arrival of the fittest. They explain the small-scale variations or changes, but they do not explain where major innovation comes from in the history of life. The functional sequences in that vast array of possibilities. And it turns out when you do the math, there isn't enough time, even assuming a 4 billion year history of life on this planet, to have enough replication events, enough copying events to search that space effectively. You're going to end up with even if all of those, every time an organism replicates from the beginning of the first life till now, a new mutation occurred searching for a new protein, you'd only search a tiny fraction of the total number of possibilities. And so it becomes much more likely that such a random search will fail than it is that such a search will succeed. The bottom line is the neo-Darwinian mechanism is just not a plausible mechanism for generating new functional biological information. As it's become clear that the various evolutionary mechanisms do not account for the origin of genetic information, there's naturally people have wondered, well, what might? And we've proposed an alternative explanation, and that is the idea of intelligent design. And the reason that intelligent design provides a good scientific explanation for the origin of the new information necessary to build new proteins and new forms of animal life is that we know from our experience that information always arises from an intelligent source. Whether we're looking at hieroglyphic inscription or a paragraph in a book or information in a section of software code or even information embedded in a radio signal, whenever we see information and we trace it back to its source, it always comes to a mind, not an undirected material process. So the discovery of information at the foundation of life and the discovery that big infusions of information are necessary to explain the origin of new forms of life suggests the activity of a designing intelligence in the history of life. The inference to intelligent design is based on our uniform and repeated experience of cause and effect, which is the basis of all scientific reasoning. We know from experience not only that the neo-Darwinian mechanism and other similar, more recent evolutionary mechanisms that have been proposed have failed to generate the information, the digital and functionally specified information necessary to build new proteins and new forms of animal life. We also know that there is a cause. We know of a cause that does generate functional digital code or digital information, and that cause is intelligence. And we have experience of that in our own realm of software technology or our human experience. In fact, here locally, our hero Bill Gates has said that DNA is like a software program, only much more complicated than any we've ever created. Now, what we know from experience is that it takes a programmer to make a program, to make a computer program. In fact, more generally, we know that whenever we see information, whether it's a software program or a hieroglyphic inscription or a paragraph in a book, whenever we see information and we trace it back to its source, we always come to a mind, not a material process. So the